Today on Conversations Aloud, we're going to discuss the economic problems facing the UK, why we are in this situation, and what should our beautiful government do. We're joined by Phillip Ullmann, who founded Covenant Advisory, an independent consultancy advising businesses and their leaders on their journey to social purpose. He's also the founder of the Manna Journey, which is an on-demand news platform dedicated to the next generation of leaders. Welcome to the show, Phillip.
Good to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Great to have you on. Thanks for coming. So, Phillip, I like to, go straight into it. If someone asked me what is the main problem facing the UK, I would say that, living standards have been decimated for the majority. There's a huge inequality between kind of the rich and the poor, mainly driven by economic problems. That's one group. And then there's another strong group which says it's immigration, immigration, immigration. What's your thoughts on this?
I think the first point you made is spot on. The issue is inequality, that the system is working for, whether it's 1% or 5%, it's working for a very small number, but it's not working for the vast majority, and people are suffering. And this is really painful. People can't put food on the table. Young people can't buy homes that they do their own. So there's immense suffering. And the inequality is reached levels never before existed. I think it's since 71, and money lost the connection with gold when Nixon voted. The money has just completely got out of control, and the inequality, you're spot on. So you're right, Hadi. The issue is inequality, and I'm not talking about inequality of opportunity, Hadi. To be clear, that the Americans or many people, as long as you have equal opportunity. That suffices. That's a cop-out. It's just a cop-out because effectively we need to ensure and create a system that makes sure that everybody's needs are met, not just have allegedly a situation where everyone has the same opportunities to make billions. That's crazy.
Yeah. Why is that that inequality is increasing? What's driving that?
Okay, to me, in a single word, it's money. The monetary system isn't working. Fundamentally, as I mentioned just now, money is created by the banks. It's crazy. Once people realize this, they say, what? But it's true. Not QE, people think is
Quantitative easing.
Quantitative easing, where the central bank creates money is the cause of the problem. Very small amounts of the real money is created by the central banks. That almost all of it, 97% or something of that order, is created by the banks, the commercial banks. And they literally magic it into existence. People need to realize this. They actually don't take in deposits and re-lend it. They actually just create the money magic it into existence, which is crazy because what they're doing is using that money for their own ends. They decide what to use it, and it causes inflation. That means it causes inflations of asset prices, which is the biggest inflationary problem. You talked about inequality. If house prices continue to grow because more and more money is being lent to house owners via mortgages, you think, oh, wonderful, I'm making a return, I'm making money. You're not. What's actually happening, more and more money is being created, which means that money is worth less because there's more of it. And it's actually, it's inflation, and it's stealing property from the younger generation. It literally is theft.
Yeah, it's interesting you just said that it's the commercial banks printing the money. Can you just explain that concept? Because our understanding is it's the central bank that prints the money, and it uses that money to buy bonds and things like that. How does the bank?
That's propaganda. People don't want the general public to understand what I've described to you. They talk about QE because they make it confused. They want people to not understand it. Yeah. So the way money comes into existence is you go to a bank, the bank literally lend you money, and it's simply an entry in a computer. Very simply, yeah. There you are. There's £1 million for you to spend. You owe it to me. That is it. It's a computer entry, and it's not. They go around collecting money from depositors. It literally is an entry in a computer. But that's balmy because more and more of it has actually been created. During my lifetime, I saw this. When I graduated in 1988, the merchant banks and derivative trading was starting to happen, but it hasn't happened. But during the course of my life, I've seen money completely losing any kind of identity. It's lost its purpose. People don't realize what it's about. The derivative traders, the quants, all of this nonsense, which is literally creating billions of pounds of nonsense without any purpose. And that has dire consequences. It means that the asset prices, whether it's the price of a home, real estate, or the price of a financial asset, which is a stock or a share, or the price of food, all of those things are literally inflated, not because people the demand for a house is more. It's not that. It's because there's more money being created by the banks to inflate the price. And that means that the poor are getting poorer and poorer because they haven't got assets. How do you get an asset if you're a younger person? Because you haven't got a house and you haven't got stocks and shares. You can't get them because the price is being pumped up by more and more lending.
Yeah, it's and to your point, the biggest disparity that we see is in house ownership. In 20 years, house prices have in London increased by more than 160%, but the population has increased by I think 16%. So there's a big difference between the population increase, but the house increases are increasing massively. And funny enough, the money supply that we know of has increased by 170% during that period, which matches actually to the house price increase.
That's exactly what it is you spot it. You've created more money, which means it's the same house. The value to people is the same. It's just money is devalued because there's more of it, which is crazy. And therefore, the banking system is the culprit. I'm not blaming anybody because this isn't something that's commonly known. But the system that's created is actually a mistake. It should never have happened. And that's why we have massive inequality and why we got people suffering in a way they shouldn't suffer.
So there's more money circulating in the system, which is going after a limited amount of assets. And who benefits is the people that hold those assets because they hold the assets already. They're appreciating much faster than, for example, wages, which have been stagnating. And so there's a gap. There's a natural gap that's happening, that's always happening. And I guess my first question is, when you say the system, do you mean capitalism system or what do you mean by or the banking system?
That is the modern the same. The whole, whether you call it bank lending or profit, it's much of a muchness. When you're making profit, you're generating more cash. It's the same thing. There's more lending. So effectively, it's all capitalism is based on banking. Accounting, I'm an accountant. I could talk with authority. It's just manipulation of bank balances. You should easily go to measuring and bank balances. You create more confusion by having all kinds of crazy accounting rules, which confuse people even more. But it's the same concept. The concept of running a business for profit is effectively saying, let's generate more and more money, which is created by more and more lending, which is inflationary. So it is banking and the capitalism model are intrinsically linked.
Yeah, and it feels like every time the economy faces an issue, our solution is money printing, which it just makes it even worse. It's an interesting reaction to the issue.
Absolutely right. And what happened with COVID? More and more money prints. What happened in 2008? The system is broken. We just print more and more money, which causes even more inflation. And as you said, that's always the solution. Now, as you know, interest rates have gone up from, 2 or 3 years ago, they were near zero, and they're now 4 or 5%. The system should have collapsed. Why do you think it hasn't collapsed, Hadi? Have a guess. Why do you think it hasn't collapsed? Because, of course, you know that if you took out a mortgage 3 or 4 years ago, and that you assumed in your modeling that you were going to pay, 2%, and now you'll pay 5 or 6%, people can't afford it. So that should have caused a housing price, a crash of the housing price. Why do you think it hasn't?
Money printing.
Exactly. The banks are lending more.
Yeah.
So rather than collapsing the system, they just lend more money. which allegedly pushes up prices again. But you did notice it's printing money and hiding the true problem, which is the printing of the money.
Yeah, it's I, I guess I'll ask you what the solution is. But one thing that, even though we're talking about interest rates, one of the worrying things I'm seeing is the 30-year gilt yield. It's about to break 5.5%, which means basically when the government's kind of borrowing. Gilts are essentially loans given by the government that people give the money to the government. It loans them the money, and the government pays an interest rate. But previously, it was paying interest rates at, as you mentioned, 2%, something like that. And once those loans expire, they have to renew them at 5.5%. And suddenly, that could, if people think that the government cannot pay, that interest is going to continue to increase. And the interest expense for the government, when you look at the budget, is extremely high. I think it's more than education, or nearing it.
You're right. What you said is absolutely right. What has happened is the central banks have lost control. Bailey has no control over interest rate because, as I say, the 30-year gilts, the yield is increasing. And they're saying we're going to reduce interest rates, so they reduce them. But it doesn't matter because the markets know that the risk of repayment is reducing because the banks have printed too much money. And therefore, they've lost complete control. And that's why Greece is in trouble. She's in serious trouble. She's going to collapse. I don't know when. It's very difficult to predict. But once you continue to see those yields, it means that Bailey and the Bank of England are not in control of interest rates because people don't trust them. So just because they reduce the bank rate by whatever, 5%, doesn't mean the interest rates in the economy will reduce, because the long-term yields, as I say, are going up, which means interest rates in the economy will. So we put a banking system which is out of control, which means that she will start to realize that she won't be able to repay the debt, and this alleged gap that she has, was it 10 billion, has gone, and she's increased employees' national insurance fund, which is balmy, completely balmy. And the system is going to collapse. Everything is pointing to me towards a systemic collapse.
Yeah, and I'm just imagining, the central bank sitting down in a circle and thinking, what is the solution to this? Let's print some money to buy the gilts, to bring down the yields, and that's what I think the only solution they have.
That's always the answer. As we say, it's always the answer. Whether it's not just the central banks, Hadi, it's the commercial banks. They do the same things that people, their portfolios are massively reduced because, of course, they lend money when interest rates were, 0.5%. So they've got lots of their portfolios underwater, because if you lend money at a low interest rate and then interest rates appreciate, the value of your loan, of your assets, are reduced because, of course, the return you're getting on those loans is less. Yeah. But they're hiding all of this. People come up to repay at the end of the 2, 3, 4, 5-year fix. They can't afford it. What do? Increase the loan. They're hiding that. They don't want us to realize how deep the problem is.
Yeah. It wasn't one of the solutions that the government put in place was to put capital restrictions on the banks in terms of how much they can lend in proportion to the deposits that they have.
That hasn't been around for a long time. There were reserve assets ratios, but that's all gone. They keep small percentages. I don't know, but fundamentally, 95% of money is lent, and there's a very small proportion that is actually kept for people that need to withdraw it. But that isn't going to work. That's not going to work, because fundamentally, I'm not sure if you realize this, Hadi, the way the system started was with fraud. The current banking system started when banks it started with gold being deposited in banks, and banks realized they could issue notes that gave access to the gold in duplicate. So initially, you put a pound or an ounce of gold, and you would get a note saying you can withdraw an ounce of gold. But then the banks realized, one minute, we can actually create 10 notes, and we've only got 1 ounce of gold. That is simply fraud, because the money wasn't there. And that system became fractional reserve banking. Actually, it's a system. So what started with fraud has become a system that we all live with, which is balmy. Yeah. That's the origins of.
At that time it was fraud when we had gold as the. What do you call now then?
But no, it's legalized fraud because they're allowed to do it. The beginning was against the law. They then made it lawful. So it's lawful. It's a crazy system. And once people realize the craziness of the system, it will explode. It will collapse hastily.
What do you think is the solution? If you were advising the government, is there anything they can do regarding this?
Yes, but it's radical, Hadi. It's radical, but it is. It's what we call it is people money. What you need to do is fix the money supply and start to give money meaning again. So, put simply, the system is going to collapse. Back to 2008, when
So when you say the
there was
system is going to collapse, just for the audience, what does that actually mean?
the banks will stop functioning because they'll lose. It's 2008. They lost trust in each other. They stopped lending each other, and then the system grinds to a halt if the banks don't trust each other. So what will happen is there'll be some realization that the banks are underwater. They are. The banks, if you really look at their assets because of the increase in interest rates, if you market to market, which means you actually say what is the value of their portfolios, they're underwater. Banks are in trouble. Once there's a realization, they realize each of the other banks is actually insolvent.
So it becomes like a credit crunch, what we had in 2009. There's no trust in.
There's
if I
no
give you
trust.
the loan, you'll pay it back because we don't know. We think you're.
We don't trust you. We don't trust you anymore. Therefore, we can't lend money to another bank because they don't trust the other bank's portfolio. They don't think the other bank's in trouble. And then but I think that's going to be much bigger than 2008. I think this time it's going to be international. That the incestuous relationship between the world banks is such that if that almost happened in 2008. They had to. They let. Which is the bank they let go down? I forget. But they
Burstins or
no, that went. I forget. They let one or two go, but they realized if you leave the big ones, the whole system collapses, and then it becomes an international collapse. So there will be a collapse in 1 or 2 or 3 banks, and then they'll all stop lending each other. And because of the international dimension, HSBCs all over the world, and the whole system will collapse, and banks will not be able to, because remember, they're lending money, they'll lose trust in each other, and the system will grind to a halt. Literally, the whole fiat currency system, i.e., the whole system of bank accounts and money being in bank accounts will collapse. People will not be able to use the money in their bank account.
But people will say, aren't there auditors, regulators that look at the balance sheet and say, okay, is this an accurate balance sheet that the banks have? Are they what's going on there?
Well, as I said to you, that the actual value of the loans is, 10 or 15 times the value of the assets they've actually got. So it's not that the audit doesn't help. The whole model is based on lending money into these existence. And therefore, the auditing isn't going to make a difference because the fundamental principle of creating money ad nauseum, which you said it yourself, Hadi, that's what it is. It's fundamentally flawed. It's a fork that happened a long time ago that we haven't realized. It wasn't recognized until 2000, until 71, because when you had a link to the gold standard, which is via the dollar, there was an element of control. Everything was linked to the dollar, and the dollar was linked to gold. So therefore, it didn't erupt until post 71. But once Nixon broke the link with the gold standard, that was completely loose. And since then, it's completely out of control. Nobody knows how much money is being created. It's completely out of control. And fundamentally, money is worthless because so much of it is being created. So once that's recognized, and the system will collapse. And that's when I think the opportunity comes to go back to basics and work out what the fork was, what the mistake was. And the mistake was Federal Reserve Bank.
Got it. Okay. So you just explained kind of what will happen when it collapses. And in terms of the solution, what would be the solution to this?
So it's very simple. As I said, we've got to limit money supply based on the size of the population, very simply. So the existing system collapses, which means money has no value, which means that the loans are written off because the loans are no good, and so the whole money, just the money you've got in the bank, is not accessible, and loans are written off. You start again. So you've got to start with a new form of money. And to me, you actually create a fixed amount of money, which is the money. So you look at the population, you look at the age, because the amount of money that a 2-year-old needs will not necessarily be the same as a 40-year-old. So you create an amount based on age, and then you create that amount of money. in a system. It's fixed. People money. Yeah, it's based on the number of people. On day one in the morning, you allocate it to people based on the size of their family. So they've got the right amount of money. And then what you're achieving is making sure that this money flows around the system. But there's no ability to create more money, because you don't need any more money. Because what I'm saying essentially is this, Hadi. What is the purpose of money? Let me ask you this. I don't know if did you do economics? You studied economics.
Yeah.
But when people ask, what is the function of money? Do you know what the economic textbooks say?
What does it say?
It says there's three functions of money. Okay, one is a unit of account, which means it's a record of what's happened in the past. Two, it's a store of value, which is it's a means of hoarding for the future. And three, it's a means of exchange, which is what we use to exchange to get things that we need. I think those are all wrong, because fundamentally, with the unit of account, it's happened, it's history, yeah? Let me tell you how crazy that is. So a unit of account means that to build a house, let's say it simply is 10 man years, okay? Let's assume that the amount for a man for you is 50,000, so it's 500,000. So you say, okay, that house took 10 years to build, cost that's 10 man years. Therefore, we're going to impose on a single person £500,000, which is a mortgage of £500,000 or dollars. Okay, that is debt, because the house is there already. It was built by people. You're imposing a huge burden on an individual, which is really a communal burden. Yeah, the responsibility of the community should be that there's enough houses, and therefore the system's essentially ensuring that you're enslaved to debt, because you are taking the burden of what was 10 man years you're never going to be able to repay. So effectively, units of account causes inflation, and therefore is a mistake. Hoarding is the same. If you need money to hoard, then people hoard money. They have more and more of it, which means they've got more money to spend on goods and services, and therefore that also pushes up prices, which is inflation. So again, hoarding is problematic. We have to create a system where people trust each other. So that's the unit of account is a mistake. Hoarding is a mistake. The third purpose that they say is a means of exchange, which means the assumption is you always need more. But once you've had your needs met, Hadi, you don't need any more. If I've got food and clothing and a home, and I don't need more. So I change that means of exchange to meeting the needs of people and the planet. So suddenly I'm saying that there is a purpose for money, which people haven't worried about, which is actually to ensure that everybody's needs are met. And that, by the way, also includes the planet. So we have to look after the land, we have to look after the environment, we have to look after ozone there. And so let's say the answer is 50. We decide that the amount for a male of working age is £50 per day. So, and let's assume, forget about women and children for the moment. Let's assume there's the population of the country is, to make it easy, 10 million, to give a simple number, and you give them £50 a day, which means the amount of money in circulation will be 500 million. Okay, that's it. That mustn't change. So day one, every male will be given. I'm not being sexist. For the purpose of illustration, it's easier that every male gets £50. There's 10 million lost £50.
So you're saying like a universal income,
so to speak. Yes, it's the same amount, but it's clear, not a welfare system. You're right to quote that the trouble with universal income, it is a universal income, but it doesn't recognize that the need of people is to do meaningful job. That's the problem with universal income. Yeah. So it says that everybody gets, let's say it's £50 a day, irrespective of whether they have a job. But I think you recognize that we have to have a meaningful existence. If I haven't got a job whereby I'm looking after other people, or I'm looking after the environment, and I'm simply on benefits and receiving £50 a day, I'm not leading a meaningful life. I'm going to become obese. I'm going to become stressed, because so it's not. It's similar to the concept of universal income, but I prefer to call it a universal need to meet everyone's needs. So you start with everybody having £50, let's say. And what you do is there's no credit in the system. Am I making myself clear, Hadi?
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
Okay, so during that day, no credit. So you pay everybody for the work that they do. So that £50 is to meet all your needs in a day. So if you buy food or clothing, all of that will be within the £50. Now, at the end of that first day, because of the imperfections of the system, not everybody will have £50 ready for the next day. Because some people will have, let's say, £1,000, and some people will have £0. So, but what we've got to then do is make sure that everybody gets their £50. So the person with £1,000, well, I say, 1 minute, I've got £1,000, which is 20 people. Yeah, 50 times 20. I've got to find 20 people who are not employed, because initially you may have to give people the money, yeah, because they haven't got jobs. But the idea is not to give people money. The idea is to give people a means to earn money. So you'll say, okay, I'm a social entrepreneur. I'll go out into the streets. I'll say, 1 minute, there are so many houses that need to be built. Let's find the 20 people who, I forget the number it was, who have actually got no work. And you then pay them the money for doing a meaningful job. So it means that the system, because it's purposeful, is trying to find a home for people, and it's looking out locally to find jobs that need to be done and people who are not actually in employment. So that's the task. Now, if you don't find people, that money is lost, because what it means is, no, £50 for every person. There's some people that £50 is somebody's money. So the system will then give the £50 to the people who haven't got jobs, because of course they need to buy the food. But the pressure will be for everybody to find that person a job. It'll be visible on the ledger, because you'll see that people who haven't got employment, and everybody will be focused together on getting the meaningful employment to ensure the flow of money. Is that confusing? Or
No, it's not confusing. It's radical.
But it's simple. It's radical, but simple. It's saying fix that. But it's very interesting. You say it's radical. I was having a haircut like 2 months ago, and my barber said, Philip, we need to limit money based on the number of people. And it's not something, it's actually completely obvious. When you think money is about providing people's needs, you obviously needed to vote for it. And we got confused. We said we need more and more money, which, as I say, is always the solution. The answer is no printing of money. Literally, money is
it's very interesting. So what you're saying is that we'd have a finite amount of money that everyone kind of gets pretty much equally based on kind of family,
yes,
age, and all those things. And then you'd have to spend that money to where there is value being created in the system.
To meet a need of people. So all these issues, I mean, I see it the whole time. The Thames Water is in trouble. It's crazy, but the reason why it's a trouble is because what you said is because of the capitalist system, because the money was raised, it was privatized, the money was taken by the shareholders, and it's crazy. And the jobs that were made redundant, which means they're not, I don't know if you saw the series in Thames Water, but there are not enough people in Thames Water to actually build the infrastructure we need. But there are huge numbers of people out of work. So the underlying cause is the fact that money isn't flowing around the system. It's the problems in the hospitals working with nurses and doctors. Again, the money isn't flowing, and therefore we haven't got the people who are unemployed. In this model, Hadi, you get 100% full employment within a very short time frame, which is everybody is immediately employed, and start to build a society that works.
It's very interesting what you just shared. I think for people, the question that will come up is, it seems like too much trust in a centralized system, because who's going to decide on, for example, the standard of education? And maybe I want a better standard than that, which requires more money. How does that work with that?
Good question. First of all, it's completely decentralized. There's no state, because you don't need a state. It's distributed to local organizations locally, because you have to be able to go out into the streets and see what people need locally. So it's not what I call a CBDC, central bank digital currency, which is dystopian, which is what we had to an extent in Canada, where they denied lorry drivers, I believe, were not
We have in
doing what we
China.
got.
China is a big thing over there with.
I know, but yeah, it's not a CBDC. It's actually a transparent ledger. This is the key. So it's not cash. Okay, this is not cash. Let's go to the things that the digital form of money. Cash is not accountable. Yeah, cash, you have no idea whether it's notes or coins. Nobody knows what it's being used. Nobody knows whose needs are. So cash is not the answer, whether it's notes or coins. The banking system of debit and credit isn't the answer because, again, it gives the banks or the central bank the right to create money, and that means that the money supply changes. So it's going to be people money, which is the kind of blockchain type ledger, but no miners and no pseudonymity, whatever the word is, whereby you don't know whose the money is. It will be transparent. So you'll be able to go onto the ledger and see who has got money and who has got needs. So it's completely distributed and decentralized because you can go to the streets and you can see what people are doing and you see what their needs are. And you start to match needs together with what needs to be done. By the way, this is not something that I'm the first person to think of. There's an interesting film on YouTube called Shillings from Heaven, which I reckon. Yes, Shillings, SCHILLINGS, Shillings from Heaven, which described this model as it applied in a town called Wergel, which is in Austria in 1933. And there a guy called the mayor, called Gergenberg or something on like some kind of mouthful, but he was a clever guy. And he recognized, as I've just described, that the problem was the monetary system. And they said, well, we got all of these things in the local community that are not being done. We're not building schools, we're not building shops. The system wasn't working in the same way as the system wasn't working because it was a centralized banking system. So he's based on the idea that the guy called Silvio Giselle, he actually literally created more money locally in the way I'm describing it, effectively people money. And he used it to pay people to do jobs that needed to be done in the local community for people that had no jobs. And they started to use that money as an alternative to the Austrian mark. And it worked. The film tells the story. This is not that long ago, in 1933. And it worked. I think the population was about 5,000. And the film very beautifully depicts how people money started to flow. Money changed hands every day. Every day you'd pay for the food that you needed, and money circulated to every day rather than the way it does in our current system very rarely. And the place started to buzz. It started to be energized, and it worked in Wergel. And then other areas saw what Wergel was doing, and they copied the idea. And this whole idea started to get out of control. But the Austrian bank said to Baz, whoa. This is undermining our monopoly. And they crushed the system by actually making it illegal, and they stopped it. But the model actually worked.
Interesting. So, there's a lot of questions jumping in my head. One of them is, does that not stifle, I guess, innovation, variety? Because once you have like a product, then why would you need a different product that other people might prefer?
Oh, it's a much more distributed model, and it moves away from standardization because everyone is treated like an individual. You look at people's needs. So why haven't we got everybody has the same smartphone or everybody has the same car? Because the production technology, the production line, to get the economies of scale, you have to produce the same thing many times over. And that's what people did. So the Model T Ford was the same. You had to create a standard car that everybody used, which was their job is, of course, is everyone's got the same. How do you persuade people to actually buy it? And that's when the whole concept of advertising came in, where you try to seduce people into buying the stuff they don't need with money they haven't got. And then you end up with a production line where people are sitting on a production line just doing the same monotonous, boring job, which dehumanizes. And it's horrible. And unfortunately, I was involved in that world. I employed a lot of people, 100,000 people a year. And a lot of them were working in the warehouses and were in jobs that were inhumane. They were running around doing 18 miles, picking based on an instruction that comes from a handheld device. So once you move away from a centralized model built around making more money, and therefore design the system to standardize the product and to standardize human beings. It starts at 1 minute. Why should everybody have the same car? In fact, why should we even use cars? Everybody. Why don't we standardize and we have light railways where people start to get together and we don't waste money on everybody having their own car, going their own way, which massively involves consumption, which destroys the environment. You move away from centralized because you're letting go. Remember, there's no state, there's no regulation, it's all distributed. So the question you may ask, okay, so if decision-making is distributed to local family, local people, how do you resolve conflicts? As I said, what happens if one person says, I want the bigger house, another person says, I want the smaller house? The answer is you do it by mediation. You're working locally and you try to get people to resolve their issues by not forcing people. There's no coercion and there's no judgment. You say, look, what do you think it's fair? You've got 4 kids. I think you need a house of a certain size. And it's resolved amicably between the people without the need for external judges to force it onto those people. If they do disagree, the way these systems work, you then mediate. You get someone else to come along from the outside to help to resolve dispute, not by escalating it, by creating a wall, but by actually trying to make peace between people and resolving the disputes amicably. So the conflict management is the key to making this kind of system work, but it's not centralized. On the contrary, there's no centralized standards. It's all distributed, and it's about individuality, not standardization.
And I guess, I mean, people, when they hear this kind of system, they jump to communism, but you're saying it's not centralized. So it's not like
absolutely, you got it.
My system.
We don't mind. We always say it's either socialism and communism, which is everything is controlled from the center, or it's capitalism, which is free, no state. But as we all know, capitalism is just as much command and control. It's not command and control by the state, but by big businesses who force us to make decisions. The big warehouses run by big businesses force people to behave in a certain way. So the power has moved from a central state to a big business, which has the same power. I'm saying both of those models fail. You have to distribute responsibility to local communities and not have coercion. Within a system, there's no coercion. You're not forcing people to the center. You're not making judgments because those things all divide. You're distributing responsibility to local families that build local communities. A good example of this is which we saw on our rounds was where were we? I forget where we were. Where we saw the local school that we were at a pub that has a school associated with where they actually treat the kids as individuals, where they actually want to recognize that everybody's an individual and they're not standard. These are kids that have slipped through the system. They didn't work in a conventional school, which unfortunately lets loads of children down. And this establishment, these lovely people decided to care for these people that were left out, that were not dealt with by the system. And they treat them like individuals. And it's local, they actually mix it with the way they run the pub. And they start to educate kids to based on the needs of the child. So again, it's not centralized. Forget about the national curriculum and all the regulation and Ofsted which goes around it. You actually say, look, we are meeting the needs of these kids. These kids love it. They're treated with respect, and you give them the skills they need as individuals. And it starts to rebuild family, and people start to build relationships. So it's a model that actually is out there. But at the moment, it's not recognized as an alternative, but it's the same for any kind of business. You can do it for schools, for universities, for hospitals. It works everywhere.
Interesting. Just one last question on that. How do you assign the right value in terms of what you should be paying for that good? Is it also demand and supply, or is it?
No. The bottom line is you only pay for people. Yeah. In this system, land is a gift. Land is appropriated. When you charge you for that, it's because you've taken it. And
so in terms of the services, how would you value that?
Based on the people. It's all you're paying for is the people involvement. So let's say I was employing 20 people, then the total amount of income I would need would be 20 people times the £50 per day. Okay. And that would be the total cost. It's only people cost because money is to provide the needs of people. So it's a pricing that will be based on the number of people. Now, it still allows you to innovate. So let's assume you found a more effective way of do whatever you wanted to do, and you require less labor. You would pay less, and therefore fewer people would be required. And in this system, because we're not competing with each other, we share ideas, yeah? Because we're all focused on each other's needs. There's no competition because everybody's focused on everyone's needs. And therefore you share your ideas with other people, and fewer people will be required, let's say, to produce whatever product you're producing. But the key is that's not the end of it. You have to find needs to meet other people's needs. You then say, okay, what other needs are not being met? And it could be mental health issues. It could be educational issues. It could be physical health. And you start to build services that meet the needs of individual, and more needs are recognized, and those needs are met. I hope you get some kind of picture of the model.
No, I do. And I guess what would happen is that you'd have a big chunk of people, instead of focusing on maybe just generating money, which in this system is considered value, they focus and shift into actual value creation for people. That's like,
it.
yeah.
As I said, as you said at the beginning, we've lost the function of money. We don't know what it's about. And therefore we think creating more money creates more people needs being there. It doesn't. It creates more inflation, which actually means that less people's needs. So we're saying we fix the amount of money, which is the focus is on providing needs. And the real value is meeting people's needs, add the need to the population as well. So and money has a real meaning.
Very interesting. How do we get there?
As I said, the system's going to collapse. So the system will collapse. And therefore, at that point in time, we mustn't repeat what happened in 2008, where Gordon Brown went into a room with the banks and they completely continued the same system. The banks were given lifelines and more money was printed, as you said. But this time around, we have to say no, people money. We've got to start limiting the money supply based on the number of people, and you do it a big bang. Now, it means that you've got to ring-fence up. The way I would do it is by country fence. Donald Trump is recognizing that because he's starting to impose tariff barriers. Because what he realizes is you to change a system, you've got to almost insulate it from what's going on outside. Otherwise, what happens elsewhere would actually contaminate your economy. So let's say we have people money in the UK and America hasn't got people money. We can't, in the short term, import goods from America because they will have the standard inflation system built in. If we import goods, it will mess up our monetary system. So in the short term, you ring fence America, the UK, which can be self-sufficient. You get overnight the transition away from meaningless money printing in some fraudulent system to meaningful, purposeful money. And then you start to get to full employment within a relatively short time frame. And then you start to say again, okay, I'm not importing from China. I'm not importing. So how am I going to meet money? Well, in the UK, we've got most of it. We've got energy, we've got food, we've got intellect. And we start to re-energize the UK. And then that could be an example. We led the Industrial Revolution, and we could lead this people revolution because it's an island, it's self-contained, and it's got what it needs. So it was a perfect place for this to happen.
Don't you think that will impact specialization, which is an advantage of trading? Like, the UK is specialized at these certain things, and it kind of improves it because it focuses only on those things and imports other things.
It's completely decentralized. Therefore, there won't be a specialization. Everybody will actually work locally, and you get many more ideas because at the moment the current system is limited. So you've got Android and iPhone. What happens if someone else wanted to start a new system? You're constrained by the system. So effectively, local communities start to resolve problems based on no centralized control, which is what capitalism should have been. Letting go of the state and distributing responsibility is right. The trouble is we had no purpose. The purpose was to make money, and therefore the freedom was good. In fact, you got the Industrial Revolution, which was healthy, but because money wasn't restricted, it then resulted in inflation and inequalities that we're living with. But if we go back to that model of freeing people to innovate and to find ideas locally, you're going to get huge growth in innovation and idea sharing, and everybody will will share ideas, and people start to get satisfaction from looking after their family, their community, and starting to do a meaningful job.
Very interesting. How did you get here? Was there a trigger that made you switch view and focus on this?
Yes, I built a big business, as I said, returning over more than $1 billion. I started with about 12 million turnover. I built it, employing about 1,000 people, built about to over $1 billion, employing 100,000 people a year. And I got no satisfaction from it at all. I did not enjoy it. And I tried to convert it into social enterprise, which is a social purpose-based, and I realized I couldn't do it because the system was fighting me. My clients were the large warehouse operators. They weren't interested in looking after people or looking after. So I tried it, and I couldn't do it. So I realized what we needed was systemic change. And as crazy as it sounds, I found the answer in the Bible. What I'm describing to you is the manna. It doesn't need to. The story is exactly the manna. So I stumbled upon it, but I hadn't. I'm a pragmatist. I realized what I'd found, but that's where it came from. It came from a biblical narrative, which happens to be an absolutely ingenious way of changing the world.
That's very interesting. I need to check that out and definitely digest what you said. But what you're saying also is that the future of the UK is going to be in the short term or medium term to be downhill, but there is a way out of it through this system of shifting people's focus away from profit to something else.
Yes. Do you recognize that you're not going to, in the short term, you're not going to get everything that, the smartphone, because if we insulate the UK, I'm not an expert in what we can do in the UK, but for a period, you're going to have to rebuild infrastructure in the UK to build what you need, but you're starting from scratch. So lots of very exciting jobs and lots of social entrepreneurial opportunities to create all the stuff that's been imported from China, and produce here and start to restart a much more natural agrarian economy. But you have to recognize in the very short term, you're not going to have exactly the same stuff as you've had because we're starting again. But once you finally, but everybody's employed. The trade-off is everyone has meaningful employment. They can start to build on a family and the communities. They have vibrant, and they'll start to recognize it's not the smartphone or the yacht or the 10 houses that the president has that actually give meaning and purpose to life. It's actually relationships, and relationships will become healthy, and people will start from the beginning, and then you get much more innovation, and then you start to get much better, innovative, creative products. But you have to recognize it's not going to be perfect straight away.
Mm-hmm. And you're right. I think everyone feels like we need to go back to community, because they're seeing what this is doing to health and mental health and families, and it's just kind of breaking society. It's funny. I watched yesterday Wolf of Wall Street, which is kind of just a great example of what money can do to you, and how in the end you realize it's a meaningless thing of collecting that much money, and the impact of that on society and on yourself. Philip, that was great what you shared. I'm going to have to digest this and do a lot of research on this a bit more. Where can people find you?
So we have a website, DiscoverTMJ.com. TMJ stands for the Manna Journey, but I got fed up with spelling Manna, so I decided to say DiscoverTMJ.com. And that's a platform where these ideas are explained. And there's no, we'd like you to subscribe. There's no paywall. We want to share ideas that change the world. And those are explained at DiscoverTMJ.com.
Okay, great. So people can go there and watch certain videos about this.
Absolutely right.
Perfect. That's awesome. So you heard where to go. Everyone go check that out to learn more about this. Philip, thank you so much for joining us today. I really enjoyed this conversation and learned a lot.
Me too. Thank you, Hadi, for inviting me. I appreciate it.